Well, hello there everyone! Kirby's Dreamland 3 is the third and final game in the Dreamland trilogy, and the second game in the Dark Matter trilogy. It has a very distinctive art style that has allowed this game to visually stand the test of time to this day, and it's also got some pretty nice levels. But how did the bosses stack up? Well, spoilers, kinda poorly. This game has one of the smallest boss rosters in the series at only 6, maybe 7 boss fights, and sadly, even with the limited quantity, I also think it's one of the weaker boss rosters in the series in general, and honest to goodness, it's in the bottom 3 alongside Squeak Squad and Planet Robobot. But because we're finally in the 16-bit era, I decided, hey, we can officially bring the tiers into it, so let's get started with one of the most uninspired boss fights in the entire Kirby franchise. Number 7, Pawn and Con. At the bottom of the list, as a surprise to no one, it's the D- Incarnate against Pawn and Con. All these two do is, supposedly, run back and forth over and over again, and occasionally a bomb will randomly drop out of one of the 3 holes in the ceiling. They never speed up, they never push boxes, they never change lanes or turn around or do anything. They don't attack you at all, they just run back and forth endlessly. This is the most uninspired fight in the series, and it's boring. I'm not too fond of their counterpart in Star Allies either, but at least in Star Allies you get to see them run at mock shit, and here they just kind of lazily move back and forth. It's not infuriating necessarily, but it's not fun at all, and it's probably a bottom 5 boss in the entire Kirby series. Number 6, Acro the Whale. Acro has 2 phases, like a lot of Dreamland 3 bosses actually, but phase 1 is unfortunately kind of a nothing phase, as all he's going to do is dash back and forth, smacking into the wall and giving you ammo to fire into him. There's nothing to this part of the fight at all. I guess I can mention in boss rush mode, the area you're in is randomly, I guess, connected to the sky or something. That's about it. Things change for the more interesting once he drops to half health and you get sent into the watery depths below. Without the ability to inhale underwater, it's now up to you to use your air bubbles to knock the projectiles he fires out back into him. However, it's kind of hard to control the angle of the attack all too well, so it ends up being a good deal clunkier than you'd hope. This leads to another repetitive and not super fun boss fight, but at least if you're lucky or very skilled, I'm neither, you can end phase 2 quickly, so it gets a better placement than the Dingus duo at the bottom, and I do still think this fight is a much better battle against Acro than his battle in Kirby 64, which it's pretty well known I absolutely despise that fight. Number 5, Dark Matter. I decided to split the fights against Dark Matter and Zero thanks to them each having their own checkpoints and music, and if I'm going to count D separately, I may as well count these two as their own fights. Anyways, despite being on much more powerful hardware, Dark Matter sadly lost half of his attacks, no longer charging across the room, dragging you into orbit, or doing basic bullet hell stuff. Now he just sort of floats back and forth through the void, firing out some dark beams and breaking off his orbs, which are not really anything you need to worry about as far as damage, because they're now just an attack you need to either avoid or stop. They're no longer a damage opportunity like they were in Dreamland 2. The fight is still fairly fun, but the Love Stick is one of the worst ultimate weapons in the series. It's the Star Rod at home, and without a lot of the risk-reward nature of the original Dark Matter fight, it just kind of becomes a mashy battle without much to say. But I do at least like his boss theme. Honestly, I think it's one of my favorite tracks in this game for whatever that's worth. It's not a bad boss, but it's kind of a downgrade from his fight in Dreamland 2, if I'm being perfectly honest. Number 4, King Dedede. Well, Dedede is back as the final boss once again, and man, what a downgrade. So, he has 2 health bars at least, but phase 1 is just kind of a slower paced version of his Dreamland 1 fight, and he no longer has any of his moves from Adventure or Dreamland 2, which means no floating into you, no hammer throw, star bullet, vertical blast, or rage mode. Plus, with only 8 health, this phase will be down in under a minute for any semi-experienced player. But then you take out his health bar and Dark Matter takes full control for phase 2, and it kinda sucks. Phase 2 has a second health bar, but he only has 2 attacks. Opening a mouth, which is creepy considering that's supposed to be where Dedede's stomach is, and charging at you, or firing off 3 projectiles. This phase takes forever because he'll just do the same 2 attacks over and over again, so you're stuck waiting for the one attack you can capitalize on, which also does a good job stopping you from actually hitting him if you're not juking him out constantly. The visual design is cool at least, but I honestly wish this phase either had another attack or half the health, because as it stands, this is probably my least favorite DDD fight in the series, other than maybe the DDD clones and Planet Robobot, and at least those had a pretty good final phase. This is just nothing. But hey, at least we did get another original composition of the DDD theme, which is pretty good considering that he didn't have one in Kirby's Adventure, and Dreamland 2 he just reused his track from Dreamland 1. So he got his own remake of the theme in Superstar, and then they redid it again for Dreamland 3, so hey, that's cool at least. Number 3, Wispy Woods. Okay, so why does Wispy shoot apples and a carrot out of his mouth in this fight? Whatever, not important. Digestion issues aside, Phase 1 is classic Wispy Woods that you know and love, while Phase 2 actually has something to change, where he'll get real mad and start charging after you, while also launching out rotten produce. You can catch it in midair and it turns into a bullet to fire at him, but if it hits the ground, it'll actually become a lingering hazard that you need to be mindful of while being chased by the world's most persistent tree, because once again, the weird tree attacked. Overall, I think this is actually a really good showing from Wispy, and this was kind of his first fight that really did something to make him stand out. Well, I guess there is also Twin Woods, but we'll talk about him when we talk about Superstar, and this is still a pretty good boss fight. Number 2, Zero. The true final boss of Kirby's Dreamland 3, the ultimate form of dark matter, and it's pretty good. To be honest, I definitely prefer Dark Matter from Dreamland 2, and especially the Zero 2 fight from Kirby 64 over this fight, but I do think this one is still alright. He has the usual suspects of firing off mini enemies as projectiles, he has a charge attack, he has blood bullets, which is unsettling, but for the most part, Zero remains as a pretty tame shmup final boss, at least for the first half of his health bar. You see, the real shakeup happens once you're finally able to get him down to half health, as he's going to gain a new attack where he will fly into the background, carpet bombing the arena and shooting, well, kind of into the foreground to hit you, which this is a really cool effect, and it's an attack for a Super Nintendo game that I like a lot. Sadly, that's actually about it moveset-wise, not a ton of variation, and he does have more health than some bosses, so the fight will take a while at least. I'm kind of mixed on the music. I think it's definitely high energy, but I'm not really sure I would call it my favorite track in the game. But there is another standout, where after you take out his health bar, the fight isn't over, as he'll reveal he has a second health bar, where his eye decides to rip itself out of his head to continue fighting you. You know, for kids! The last phase is more of a victory lap, however, as the eye can only really try to run into you, and he takes heavy damage from basically every hit, so he shouldn't take more than maybe 9 or 10 hits to bring down. It's really more there as a send-off to the Dreamland trilogy and kind of a victory lap. But hey, this wouldn't be the end of the Dark Matter trilogy. This isn't quite the end of our boss ranking, and I do think, at least as a final boss, it does a pretty good job, even if it's not my favorite fight in the game. Number 1, Ado. Okay, so serious question, is this supposed to be Adeline from Kirby 64 and Star Allies? They look basically the same, but for some reason both HAL and Nintendo have intentionally left it obscure if she's the same person or not. Anyways, just like Adeline, this boss is really good, and she can bring her paintings to life. So, that actually gives you a bit of a mini-boss rush, and the most varied array of attacks in the game, thanks to her 5 phases, as she has you battling against Dreamland 2's boss fights, mostly. Bosses starting with things like Ice Dragon, then you get Sweet Stuff, which hilariously will last longer here than their entire Dreamland 2 fight did, followed by a little mini-phase against Mr. Shine and Mr. Bright, which isn't nearly as cool as the two boys themselves, but still a cute reference, before capping off with a fight against Kracko that has its own twist on his moveset, with his various Thunderbolts and Kracko spawn, as well as having a full-blown boss health bar, making for one of the more challenging boss fights in this game as well, which is fitting considering this is supposed to be the last fight before the final real world of the game, because, you know, we all know World 6 is just kind of the final boss fight. Her final phase, though, is really just a joke phase of an opponent where she'll go down in a single hit. Overall, though, I would say Ado is my personal choice for the best boss in Kirby's Dreamland 3, and a good fight. Though, that's high watermark is nowhere near as high as a lot of other Kirby games, as we'll see whenever we talk about Kirby Superstar. Still, I do think it's a good boss, and I will not take that away from this fight. And that's all I've got for this video. Dreamland 3 is a very pretty game with some nice levels, but it's still one of the weaker boss lineups overall, and completing this game is kind of a pain in the butt to deal with because all of the collectibles you have to get, and not my idea of a super fun time. I still can recommend giving it a try, as you can play the full game in co-op, which is really cool, but I'd say this is one of the weaker Kirby games in my eyes, getting by mostly because of charming visuals and the disturbing main antagonist. Anyways, that's all I've got for now. If you're wondering why I skipped over Superstar, that's because that game has a lot more boss fights to cover, and I wanted to wrap up the Dreamland and Dark Matter trilogy first and foremost. That's it for this video. If you want to see more videos from me of varying quality, consider liking and subscribing, and assuming I didn't mess up the editing, you might actually see 2 of them posted there in the end card. That's all I've got for now. I will see you all next time, hopefully with the Dark Souls 3 video. Until then, take care.